Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I declare open the 407th meeting of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. The provisional agenda for the meeting has been distributed by the Secretariat for your consideration. And if you have no objection, I consider that the agenda is adopted. I see none. It's so decided. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Ecuador and Malta, who are members of the committee, for being elected to serve in the UN Security Council during 2023 and 2024. The committee looks forward to work with these countries in their new capacity. We can now move to agenda item number 2, which is an update by the observer mission of the State of Palestine. And as you know, as usual, we always start our meeting with that update. And I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Feda Abdelhadi to provide an update on the political situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, as well as on any other diplomatic or political developments. I give the floor to Ambassador Abdelhadi. You have the floor.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, and distinguished delegates. I extend first the apologies of Minister Mansour, who could not attend today's meeting as he has traveled to Palestine. I would like to also begin by thanking you, Mr. Chair, and thanking the Bureau and all members and observers of the committee for the efforts made in the recent period to implement the committee's 2022 program of work, and most importantly, for your ongoing principled solidarity with the Palestinian people. As reaffirmed at several junctures, including inter alia in the April Security Council open debate on the Palestine question, and in several committee events, including the most recent event on apartheid, international law, and the occupied Palestinian territory, which we believe was a serious and necessary discussion about the reality of apartheid being imposed on the Palestinian people. And we recognize also the significant contribution of the Foreign Minister of South Africa in this regard. We commend the committee's courage to honestly and openly address this matter in line with its mandate to raise awareness about the Palestinian plight in all of its dimensions, aimed at mobilizing international action to bring an end to this historic injustice. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, last month on the 5th of June, we somberly marked the 55th year since the start of the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, which was preceded by the somber commemoration in May of 74 years since the onset of the 1948 Nakba, an historic injustice that the Palestinian people continue to endure under Israel's illegal occupation and apartheid regime. Since we last met in May, we have witnessed continuation of violent attacks and terror by Israeli occupying forces, including extremist settlers, resulting in the killing, injury, and maiming of civilians, including children, with at least 17 Palestinian children murdered by Israeli soldiers since the start of the year, in addition to 53 women, youth, and men. Here, I would also like to refer to the annual report of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflict, in which it was confirmed that in 2021, Israeli occupying forces, including settlers, killed 78 Palestinian children, maimed 982 children, and 637 children were detained in Israeli prisons, in addition to thousands of other human rights violations and incidents of ill treatment of children, including in attacks on schools and hospitals. In this year's report, the Secretary General not only conveys his shock at, quote, the killing and injuring of Palestinian children by Israeli forces in airstrikes on densely populated areas through the use of live ammunition, and at the continued lack of accountability for these violations, end quote, but has for the first time explicitly warned, quote, should the situation repeat itself in 2022 without meaningful improvement, Israel should be listed end quote, among those systematically violating child rights, a call we have long been making. In this regard, we are grateful for the Bureau's engagement with the SRSG for Children and Armed Conflict on this very critical and urgent matter, and we urge committee members and observers to seriously reflect on these alarming facts, including in their possible engagement in the upcoming debate in the Security Council on Children and Armed Conflict on 19 July, and to insist on accountability for these crimes against Palestinian children and their families. Palestinian civilians also have continued in the recent period to be arbitrarily arrested and detained, including 170 children who are among the 4,000 still being held captive by the occupying power. Also, the bodies of as many as 105 Palestinians killed by the occupying forces continue to be inhumanely withheld, denying to them dignity even in death and the chance for their families to properly bury their loved ones. We call for the immediate release of all Palestinians being illegally held by Israel, both the living and the deceased. The Palestinian people also continue to be dispossessed of their homes and lands and forcibly displaced as Israel persists with its colonization of our land. Ignoring the Security Council, General Assembly, and ICJ, and gravely breaching the Fourth Geneva Convention, Israel is carrying on with its construction of settlements, especially in and around occupied East Jerusalem, expanding its apartheid wall, demolishing homes and properties, and expropriating Palestinian land. In fact, Israel does not hide its intentions to colonize and annex more Palestinian land with less and less Palestinians on it. And we see this shockingly now in Masafer Yatta, where 1,200 Palestinians, including over 500 children, are being threatened with forced transfer by an occupying power that thinks it is appropriate to remove civilians, basically to ethnically cleanse them, in order to establish a military training zone for its army in the land it is illegally occupying. Palestinian Jerusalemites are also living under extreme pressures and constant threat of displacement from their homes in the city, especially in Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan, and Wadi Qaddum, and the Old City and its holy sites, especially Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Haram al-Sharif, continue to be targeted by violent provocations and incitement by Jewish settlers, the occupying army, and Israeli politicians. This was shockingly witnessed in June when thousands of Israelis besieged Jerusalem in the so-called Flag March, marking Israel's seizure of East Jerusalem in the 1967 war and its continued occupation and annexation of the city. Grave breaches, war crimes that are actually celebrated by Israel. And in the Gaza Strip, over 2 million Palestinians are still living under Israel's illegal air, land, and sea blockade, which has now surpassed 15 years. The dire humanitarian and socioeconomic impact, in addition to the mass psychosocial trauma, including on children who have known nothing but Israeli military occupation, aggression, and blockade all their young lives, are all well known, and yet nothing is being done to pressure Israel to end this blockade and hold it accountable for this inhumanity. This, in addition to Israel's imposition of a racist, discriminatory permit regime only on Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, further expose the extent to which Israel will go to oppress the Palestinian people and control their land. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, this is the harsh reality that prevails in occupied Palestine, and it is what has led global human rights organizations, alongside Palestinian and Israeli organizations, and also former Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Michael Link in his last report, to determine that the situation is not only one of an illegal occupation, but that Israel is also imposing an apartheid regime on the Palestinian people. And this is something that we not only urge committee members and observers, but also the wider international community to recognize and directly address in line with international legal obligations, including under the Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid. While the apartheid determination may make some uncomfortable, these facts cannot be ignored and make it politically, legally, and morally incumbent for collective action to be taken to bring an end to the war crimes and crimes against humanity being perpetrated against the Palestinian people. In this regard, Mr. Chair, we reject the accusations of anti-Semitism against anyone who speaks out about this abhorrent reality, whether Amnesty International, the Independent Commission of Inquiry at the Human Rights Council, or anyone else, including by this committee. This is not about anti-Semitism, but about opposing the policies and practices being committed by a state, an occupying power, that are illegal and inhumane. This is also why we firmly reject the attempts to impose the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism here at the UN, as recently proposed by some in meetings of the UN Alliance of Civilizations, as this definition is clearly being exploited to silence debate and avert accountability measures aimed at halting Israel's human rights violations and grave breaches. This brings me to our priority appeal to the members and observers of this august committee, an appeal for practical, collective, and individual efforts to promote accountability. We urge all countries to speak out and pursue measures in line with international law and UN resolutions and their obligations in this regard. Israel cannot remain exempt from the rule of law. Our words must be matched with action. Only such action can help us to reverse the dangerous trajectory we are on and open a genuine political horizon towards a just, secure, and peaceful future for the Palestinian and Israeli peoples. We are grateful to the countries that are taking steps for accountability and urge them to continue their efforts and to also make those efforts known to the international community in order to encourage more countries to uphold their responsibilities in this regard. Mr. Chair, delegates, in the fall we will mark 75 years since the General Assembly's decision to partition historic Palestine with its Resolution 181, since the Palestinian people were stripped of their homeland and left to this unjust fate. It is beyond high time for serious action to bring an end to this injustice that has incurred such devastating human consequences across generations as our people continue to be denied their rights, including to self-determination and freedom, and including the right of return of millions of Palestine refugees, and as our region continues to be deprived of peace and security. It is time to live up to the commitments and international consensus on the two-state solution on the pre-1967 borders before that solution is completely destroyed by Israel and no longer an option. We recognize this committee's leading role as mandated by the General Assembly to assist the Palestinian people towards the realization of their inalienable rights, and we express our gratitude for the long years of support and solidarity and urge you to remain at the forefront of the efforts to promote responsible collective action to prevent civilian lives and not only salvage but advance the realization of a just solution to the Palestine question. It is time for pressure to come to bear on the Israeli government, which is the party that continues to violate the law and obstruct peace with total impunity. When an Israeli prime minister openly boasts about his government's rejection of Palestinian statehood, of the two-state solution and negotiations, it is time to act to reinforce the international consensus in the face of such impunity. So again, we stress that it's time for accountability, including legal efforts in courts, including the ICC, and with the withholding of any support to this illegal situation, including in connection with Israel's colonial settlement regime. We therefore reiterate our appeal as we approach the 76th session of the General Assembly for support to our efforts, whether at the General Assembly, Security Council, Human Rights Council, and ECOSOC, or in its judicial bodies such as the ICC and the ICJ, to address the root causes towards achieving a just solution in accordance with international law, the relevant UN resolutions, and the Arab Peace Initiative. And this must, of course, include a just solution for the Palestine refugees based on Resolution 194. And that brings me to my final point, Mr. Chair. I wish to reiterate our calls for support to UNRWA. We are grateful to all states that have made contributions or announced support at the recent pledging conference, including members and observers in our committee. But we stress that a funding shortfall remains and urge that the resources be mobilized to ensure continuity of its essential humanitarian assistance and protection to the Palestine refugees and to enable the continuity of the agency's important stabilizing role in the region. We also call for renewal of UNRWA's mandate this fall by the broadest majority possible. In closing, I once again express our thanks to the Chair and Bureau, and thanks to the committee as a whole, as well as the Division for Palestinian Rights, for their tireless efforts in support of the Palestinian people, and also to all the states, intergovernmental organizations, and civil society groups extending support to the committee and solidarity to our people. And lastly, I wish to also join you, Chair, in congratulating Ecuador and Malta on their election to the Security Council, and also to reaffirm our readiness to cooperate as they uphold their important mandates. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador Feda Abdelhadi for this update. I would like now to open the floor for comments or questions, if any. I can see South Africa. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And we would, of course, also like to thank our dear sister, Ambassador Fida, for her remarks and intervention this morning. South Africa continues to be dismayed by the daily oppression, displacement, and dispossession that is the daily experience of the Palestinian people. We believe that the dignity and the human rights of the Palestinian people should not be negotiables. We reject the apartheid-like laws and subjugation that they are exposed to on a daily basis. We are also dismayed that the Security Council continues to fail to act to fulfill their responsibility in this regard. Mr. Chairman, this committee and the rest of the international community needs to speak up on the situation of the people of Palestine. Israeli practices need to be universally condemned, and Israel should be held accountable for all its actions and activities. I thank you.
I thank the representative of South Africa for taking the floor. Is there any other one wanting to take the floor at this stage? I see none. If Ambassador Abdelhadi doesn't have any other additional comments, I'm going to move to the next point. Do you have additional comments? Thank you. So we can now move to the next item, which is an update on activities of the committee. And under this agenda item, I will report on recent activities of the Program of Work 2022 that the committee has implemented since my last update in February 2022. As you are aware, the Bureau of the Committee has been meeting with New York-based member states from the Middle East Quartet, the P5, and the E10 members of the Security Council to exchange ideas on ways to reinvigorate and support efforts to resume the Middle East peace process. And since February, following meetings with other members of the Security Council, P5, E10, and also from members of the Middle East Quartet, the Bureau met since February with the permanent representative of Brazil on the 23rd of February, the permanent representative of Ghana on the 15th of March, and with the permanent representative of Gabon on the 22nd of April. On behalf of the committee, on the 28th of February, the Division for Palestinian Rights organized its annual briefing for new delegates on the General Assembly mandate and work of the committee on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. On the 22nd and 23rd of March, and at the invitation of the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, I delivered a statement at the 48th session of the organization's Council of Foreign Ministers held in Islamabad. And as you know, the OIC remains a valuable strategic partner of the committee in the implementation of our mandate. We are grateful to the OIC for funding the printing of acclaimed booklets reproducing the exhibits displayed at the UN for the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. On the 23rd of March, the committee held a virtual meeting on the impact of forced displacement on Palestinian women on the margins of the 66th Commission on the Status of Women, CSW, with an all-female panel that included residents of the East Jerusalem neighborhoods of Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan. And the 2-hour event was live streamed on UN Web TV and on the committee's social media channels. On 30th of March, the committee held its annual consultation with the President of the 76th General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, and called on the committee to propose bold ideas to help advance the question of Palestine. On the 5th of March, a Bureau delegation met with His Excellency Mr. Simon Coveney, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense of Ireland in Dublin as part of a committee delegation visit to Ireland. And during the visit, we also had separate meetings with the representatives of the Green Party, which is part of the government coalition, and Sinn Féin, which is the main opposition party, as well as others. And from our discussions, it was clear that Ireland strongly supports Palestinian rights, and the committee should continue to leverage this support in the future. On the 6th and 7th of May, in cooperation with the Irish Centre for Human Rights of the National University of Ireland, Galway, the committee organized a closed-door seminar in Dublin on the legality of the Israeli occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. The seminar discussed legal strategies to address Israel's protracted occupation among 8 prominent scholars, including 2 former rapporteurs on human rights and other Palestinian diplomats, including the Palestinian observer in Geneva and the ambassador to The Hague. And Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs Maliki joined the closing of the seminar. Closely related to the seminar event, I would like to inform the committee commissioned a legal study for the Irish Centre for Human Rights at the National University of Ireland, Galway, to examine the legality of the Israeli occupation. This research project commenced on the 1st of June and is expected to be finalized by the end of this year. On the 20th of April, a delegation of the Bureau participated in a briefing on the situation in Palestine to the NAM caucus of the Security Council. On the 25th of April, the committee delivered a statement to the quarterly Security Council open debate on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. And I thank again Vice Chair Ambassador Neville Gertz of Namibia for delivering the statement on behalf of the committee. On the 27th of April, the committee held the virtual event entitled Al-Khalil Hebron, a case study for the impact of Israeli settlements on Palestinian rights under occupation, end quote, to highlight Israel's ongoing illegal settlement campaign and its impact on the rights of the Palestinian people. Speakers included Palestinian, international, and Israeli civil society representatives, as well as a UN representative. On the 11th of May, the Committee Bureau issued a press statement condemning the killing of Al Jazeera journalist Mrs. Shireen Abu Akleh while covering an Israeli military operation in Jenin, West Bank, that same day. Her death deprives us of one of its most experienced and admired correspondents who exposed the continuous violations of Israeli rights by the occupying power. On the 16th of June, the committee organized a virtual high-level conversation on apartheid, international law, and the occupied Palestinian territory to discuss the recent report by Amnesty International with an interactive dialogue between the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zaid Rad Al-Hussein, and Agnes Kalamar, Amnesty International Secretary General. In her video message to the event, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Her Excellency Mrs. Naledi Pandor, made analogies between apartheid in her country and the situation in Palestine. And we are grateful to South Africa for this compelling statement. On June 22nd, the Committee Bureau delegation met with the SISG for Children and Armed Conflicts, Mrs. Virginia Gamba, to share ideas on how to respond to the widespread Israeli violations of the rights of Palestinian children, including killings by live ammunition. With regards to important upcoming committee activities, I would like to mention that the preparation of the annual report of the committee for 2022 is underway. As is customary, the draft report will be circulated for comments, most likely at the end of August, prior to its final approval. Now I open the floor for questions or comments on this item. I recognize Turkey. Turkey, you have the floor.
Thank Ambassador Feda for her briefing. It is sad to see that the Palestinian issue is losing its rightful place on the agenda of the international community. Some other conflicts are getting more and more focus. And the work of this committee is very important to make sure that the plight of the Palestinians are brought to the agenda of the international community. We will continue to support of the work of the committee. Now, as you know, my mission is working at its new place, right across from this headquarters. We would like to invite the committee to use our facilities at the Turkish House. We have a huge auditorium where we can host up to 150 people. So we would be happy to host the events committee might be willing to organize in the future. My country is also chairing the working group on the financing of UNRWA. Soon we will release the report of the working group. It doesn't look very promising, as Ambassador Feda has mentioned. It looks like the agency needs up to $100 million to continue to function next fall. So I don't know if there is any limitation about the mandate of this committee, but the committee should consider organizing an event to raise the awareness about the financial problems of the agency. It might be useful to get the support we need to extend the mandate of the agency next session. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Turkey. Do we have anyone else wanting to take the floor? Okay, I can see China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for coming into today's meeting and also for your introduction of the committee's work, which China fully supports. We also would like to thank Ambassador Feda for her briefing on the latest situation on the occupied Palestinian territory. China is deeply concerned over the deteriorating situation in the occupied Palestinian territory. We note with concern under the Israeli occupation, Palestine's viability has been squeezed to the limit. The continued expansion of settlements has encroached upon Palestinian land and natural resources, undermines the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, and made it geographically contiguous, independent, and sovereign state of Palestine ever more elusive to achieve. The continued violence by Israeli security forces and the settlers has resulted in the heavy Palestinian casualties, including children, which has also been reported in most recent SG's CAC report. As the Chinese permanent representative pointed out in the Security Council last month, the question of Palestine as a limited test of the international justice and fairness. Piecemeal crisis management cannot substitute for a comprehensive and just settlement. Limited economic and humanitarian measures cannot erase political and security deficit. And individual national policies cannot replace long-established international consensus and multilateral process, including resolutions adopted by the Security Council and the General Assembly, one after another. And what is needed for the time being is urgent and decisive actions so as to prevent the trend of the Palestinian-Israeli situation from totally falling off the track. We call upon the international community, especially those having key influences on the parties concerned, to make genuine efforts for the peace process in the Middle East. This would mean promoting the two-state solution with the utmost urgency, rather than waiting for so-called conditions for dialogue to mature. This would mean adhering to the concept of indivisibility of security, giving equal importance to the security concerns of both Palestine and Israel, rather than allowing tacitly that the security of one side be built on the insecurity of the other. This also means preserving in a responsible attitude, rather than allowing policy flip-flop to further complicate the peace process. China will always be on the side of peace and justice, on the side of human conscience and fairness, and on the right side of history. We will firmly support the just cause of the Palestinian people to restore the legitimate national rights, and will continue to make unremitting efforts for achieving comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the representative of China for this very strong statement. And now give the floor to my friend and brother, the Ambassador of Malaysia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for the delay coming to your meeting. On this issue, I just heard that we have a lot of concerns with regard to the issue of Palestine, and I think it is up to us, all of us, to continue giving our support on the issue of Palestine, especially from the members of this committee, as well as other members of other related committees. And this can be done in so many ways. One is financially, of course, within our capacities to do so. For those that have more capacity, can give more. For those that have less capacity, can do in whatever way or form they could. Although it is probably small, but it goes a long way to help our Palestinian brothers and sisters. I just came back with our chair from visiting one of the UNRWA camps in Marka, and they really appreciate the support that has been given by those countries so far, and the situation doesn't look very promising as mentioned in this meeting. So we have to continue to do the best that we can. And of course, at the political level as well, I know that some of us have been issuing statements whenever any incidents happen in Palestine, but as you know, these incidences happen daily, and we have to continue to keep the file high at the agenda at the UN, and we should continue to participate in meetings, be it at the Security Council or GA, and raise the issue. If we do not do this, then I think it is up to us why we fail to keep the file high in the agenda of the UN here in New York. And at the same time, we need to talk to our colleagues also, including in NAM or G77, to also speak on this issue. I know sometimes when the NAM or G77 already made statements, we tend to not to speak, but at the same time, I think we should amplify all those statements so that our support will be seen audially and visually as well. And wherever possible, as our representative from Turkey mentioned, if you have the facilities to do so, I'm sure it will be much appreciated by this committee. And Malaysia is also looking at any possibilities to arrange anything that is possible. And if we have an agreement with the relevant parties, we will do so accordingly at the right time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now I give the floor to Ambassador Feda Abdelhadi of Palestine. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to express my thanks to the distinguished representatives of South Africa and Turkey and China and Malaysia for their interventions and for the strong expressions of support to Palestine, as well as the calls for action, the calls for engagement here at the UN, keeping it high on the agenda of the United Nations, as just stressed by the distinguished ambassador of Malaysia, the need to amplify our individual and collective statements, making our voices louder than the voices of the detractors, making our voices heard, and underscoring that the Palestine question remains a priority for states, again, here in the UN, but within the broader international community. And as the representative of China said, that this is a litmus test for fairness and justice in the international community and the credibility of the multilateral system as represented by the UN, and should not be an issue that is set aside, but rather that all efforts are made to justly resolve. And I wanted to also comment, Mr. Chair, on the importance of recent committee events in the past few months, those focused on women, focused on forced displacement from in Al-Khalil, Hebron, those focused on apartheid and occupied Palestine. All of these events have been really important in raising awareness, not only among delegations here at the UN, but more broadly across the international community. And I think that's reflected in the figures that the Division for Palestinian Rights has amassed in terms of viewership, and maybe can hear about that from Elio and the division. And in this regard, I wanted to also commend the committee's engagement with civil society, including Palestinian, Israeli, and international civil society actors. And to underscore the importance of continued outreach, in particular to Palestinian civil society organizations that are being criminalized by Israel, the occupying power, in an attempt to diminish their voices and their contribution to the international conversation on Palestine, on the realities in Palestine. And you referred to the horrific killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, a prominent Palestinian journalist who was bringing the Palestinian story to the forefront. And with her loss, it makes it even more necessary to amplify Palestinian voices. And I just wanted to also underscore a recent statement, I believe it was yesterday, that was issued by 9 European governments that are funders of Palestinian civil society organizations that have completely refuted Israel's allegations against the 6 civil society organizations accused of being terrorist organizations. And so we need to push back against that, including through continued energized engagement with these civil society organizations and allowing them opportunities to be part of the international discussion and the international efforts to promote justice for the Palestinian people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Abdelhadi. Now I give the floor to the representative of Malta. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor, and I would also like to thank you and Ambassador Feda for your kind words and your statements. We very much look forward to joining the Security Council from next year and to continue contributing to multilateralism and also to the principles of that are enshrined in the UN Charter. As you know, Malta's principled and long-standing position on the Middle East is well known. We will continue to push for a just and comprehensive solution to this conflict that's been going on for too long now. So this is something that we will definitely be highlighting during our term on the Council. As also underlined by our colleague from Turkey, we too are very much concerned about the situation with UNRWA. We see UNRWA as a stabilizing force in the region, an agency that offers stability through its work, and this is an agency that we are very happy to support also financially, and we too call upon the international community to continue to provide it with all the assistance it needs so that it can continue providing Palestine refugees with all the essential services that they need. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for his very strong statement too. And I would like to now give the floor, I think, to there's another one. Egypt. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you for convening this meeting, and of course our position regarding supporting our Palestinian colleagues is very well known. We are also concerned about the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, and of course we will work in cooperation with our Palestinian colleagues and of course with you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the committee to support our Palestinian colleagues. Regarding the proposals we heard, of course, I support all the proposals regarding supporting the Palestinian question through carrying out several events during the coming period. And at the same time, I would like to propose that we might include, of course, during our coming events and maybe gradually up to the convening of the fourth committee and the General Assembly. During the next session of the General Assembly, we might have several events to support the renewal of the mandate of UNRWA. And in this regard, of course, we recognize all the efforts that are being carried out by the committee, and maybe we can start considering having like social campaigns on social media. Of course, we recognize all the efforts carried out by the division in support of the Palestinian question, but maybe we can consider highlighting more our support to the Palestinian question, especially on social media, and using the available and the support that can be rendered by the Global Communication Department in this regard, and maybe we can discuss this issue during our coming meetings more into details. But I think we can start also to focus on social media. Of course, we can see all the efforts you are carrying out on social media, but I mean, why not having a campaign, for example, like the campaigns that are being carried out by the Global Communication Departments regarding other issues, regarding COVID-19 or other important issues. We can have our own campaign regarding the renewal of the mandate of UNRWA, for example, or regarding the activities of the committee and the Palestinian question in general. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Egypt for his contribution. I don't see any other delegation wanting to take the floor. I think when Ambassador Abdelhadi was making her presentation, I think she raised a question, and I think I can give the floor to the Secretariat to respond to Ambassador Abdelhadi on that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that about 2 years ago, at the request of the Bureau, a specific request of the Bureau, the division started to invest more in digital advocacy. So that coincided also with the onset of the pandemic, so that it was timed very well, because we couldn't do international meetings in presence anymore, international conferences. So two sides. One, we invested a lot in promoting the Twitter account of the committee, but also on reaching out through social media, our distribution mailing list, and we started to also monitor and training ourselves on these new skills that are required to carry out these additional tasks. So on one hand, we see now that these efforts are bearing fruit. Our Twitter account has doubled in the number of followers. We surpassed 10,000 now, and I invite all members and observers of the committee to be engaged also with the account of the committee, the Twitter account of the committee, and when possible, please retweet. And this is the thing of the day today. So please retweet and provide also, if you have ideas like the representative of Egypt, we will welcome to consider. We also have a mailing list that has more than doubled in the last 2 years. We have over 10,000 subscribers that receive all the information. Of course, not everybody opens the emails because we can monitor also the readership, but the numbers are increasing and people self-subscribe through the website, the UNISPAL website, which is like the repository of all the documentation of the on the question of Palestine, which is the most comprehensive in the world, I would say. So people can also self-subscribe now to the mailing list through the website. And of course, we also have an account in Facebook, in YouTube, etc. So my point on this digital advocacy side is that the interest on the question of Palestine obviously is growing, and the information provided by the committee is relevant, and there is a demand for it that we're trying to meet. So all the statistics show that following and viewership, visits to the website are going up. At the same time, on the issue of the virtual events that we were forced to do because of the pandemic, and we hope soon to also mix with some in-person conferences, that has revealed that the viewership of the events organized by the committee also have increasingly been growing up. So on average, the events have a viewership of 1,000 viewers to start with, and then over time the numbers keep increasing because, as you know, people no longer watch things live, but they choose to watch them at their convenient time. So overall, I think the digital advocacy strategy of the committee is working in terms of outreach, and this has been a transition from more traditional ways of advocacy into new forms of advocacy, of course. Of course, we would appreciate the cooperation of everybody, also members of the committee, to make sure that, you know, this outreach keeps improving. And we will take into consideration the suggestions made on the issue of specific campaigns. Of course, it's not the same as the Department of Global Communications because we don't have the capacity to do targeted campaigns, but we'll do as much as we can in that sense. I would like to add also that UNRWA, its features every year several times in our programming. We had also several briefings, regular briefings, and we will continue to do that. But we will consider how to emphasize the question of UNRWA in the run-up to the renewal of the mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I would like to also thank all those delegations who have taken the floor, starting by Turkey. I think Turkey is right when they say that the situation in Palestine is being overshadowed by other conflicts, and we should not let it happen. We should also keep mobilized to make sure that it's there. We talk about it, and we address it as it should. We also thank Turkey for its offer of its venue for events the committee might want to organize. And thank you, China, also for your very strong position, which have been very constant position of the Chinese delegation. And we really appreciate your engagement and looking forward to more engagement from you in the committee. I think your voice is needed in this very difficult situation. Malaysia, thank you very much for your call, for your very strong call for support, both financially and politically. And as you say, we need to really speak up and be more visible in making sure that we can address the Palestinian cause. And you mentioned our visit to the Marka UNRWA site. You have to be there to know the real situation in which refugees are living. Very, very difficult, and maybe we should highlight that here more. I don't know how we can do it, really to make sure that people can be sensitized to the very difficult situation. And Feda, you are right. I think We have done a lot in reaching out to civil society organizations, and I think we need to do more. And I think the more we reach them, I think the more our call will be heard in more widely. So I think we should do that. Malta, thank you also for your commitment. Thank you for your engagement, and we are glad that we can still count on you. And we hope that you will reconsider coming back to the bureau. We need you there. So keep it open, and whenever you're ready, we'll be very happy to have you back in the committee. Egypt, thank you very much. You know, we have been, these past 2 years, I think we have done a lot in social media campaign, but we need to do more. And I think your advice is well taken, well heeded, and the committee and the bureau will see how we can make sure that we can do more about it. So this said, I'm going to go to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 4, consideration of request for accreditation of civil society organizations. As you know, the committee receives a regular request from civil society organizations for the accreditation to the committee. And through the accreditation, interested organizations acknowledge their activities to support and promote the resolution of the question of Palestine, and they partner with the committee in its advocacy efforts. So accreditation is a process in which they become part of the committee's network. The committee's accreditation criteria and additional information on the benefits of accreditation were circulated in advance of this meeting and are also available on the committee website. The Bureau reviewed all the requests received at its meeting on the 2nd of June. And since our last review, in August 2021, the Secretariat has received 14 requests, 14 requests from civil society organizations, and the division shared with you a list of organizations and the accreditation review note by the Secretariat. The Secretariat conducted a review of the requests based on the following committee criteria for accreditation, which stipulates that civil society organizations seeking partnership with the committee should first be a recognized local, national, or international non-profit organization. Second, support the Charter of the United Nations, the principles of international law, and the achievement of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, primarily its right to self-determination. Third, have demonstrated that it has concrete programs or the serious intent to establish such programs in support of the achievement of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Following a thorough review of the applications and the available information, the Bureau recommends accreditation by the committee of the following 3 organizations: Leonard Education Organization, LEO, based in the United States; Law for Palestine, L4P, based in Sweden; and Hebron Rehabilitation Committee, HRC, based in the state of Palestine. And accreditation has not been recommended for the other organizations based on the available information which have been received by the committee. The Bureau would like to request the committee to approve those 3 Bureau recommendations concerning LEO, L4P, and HRC. If I see no objection, I will take it that the committee approves the 3 organizations mentioned above. Now let's move to the last agenda item, any other matters. Are there any issues under other matters that committee members want to raise? The floor to the Secretariat to make an announcement.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to remind everyone that next week on the 20th of July, from 10 to 12 in the morning. The committee will be organizing an event that is an annual event that we do together with the OIC on youth in East Jerusalem, okay, Palestinian youth in East Jerusalem, to describe their challenges, but also highlighting youth as agents of change. So all the information has been circulated. We will send reminders, plus also the way how to participate in the meeting. So we would appreciate also your support and participation in that event. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Does any other delegation want to take the floor? Any delegation want to take the floor under AOB? I see none, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.